Working Cows Podcast, episode 392. This episode is brought to you by Understanding Ag.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag studios, and this episode is brought to you by Understanding Ag. We've been fortunate to feature a number of Understanding Ag's regenerative farming and ranching experts on the podcast over the years. In that time, Understanding Ag's reputation for helping producers understand and successfully and profitably apply money-saving regenerative principles and practices has only grown. And there are two primary reasons for that. First, Understanding Ag's consultants are farmers and ranchers who've been there, done that on their own regenerative farms. And second, Understanding Ag's consultants aren't in the business to sell you costly inputs. They get no commissions and you get no pressure. Just profit-building solutions for your operation. Learn more at understandingag.com and discover the hope in healthy soil. That's www.understandingag.com. Very excited to be joined once again by Amber Bell. She is started a new podcast, and she's working for an organization, a media organization up there in Canada, and wanted to have a chat with her about the new podcast, what it's all about, and what she has been focusing on, some of the things she's been learning. She's broadening her horizons a little bit and getting a view of different parts of even the beef sector than she had been familiar with previously. So, Amber, welcome back to the Working Cows Podcast. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks. Fantastic to be here, Clay. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. It's experiments in stock density, I think, or something like that was the last time we talked.
Something of that nature. I feel like I'm still experimenting with stock density. Nothing's changed.
Never done, right? I think one of the for Understanding Ag, the 6, the 3, and the 4. One of those is, or actually diversity disruption comes up there frequently, that we want to disrupt what we're doing, not do the same thing every year. So, I think that's a point in there. And so
Right.
I don't think we're ever done experimenting with stock density.
One of my focuses in the last little bit has really been on context. I'm running some pigs and actually trying to use them to create a garden. And so that's a complete different thing that I want to do with that when compared to, hey, I want grass to grow, right? So the context piece is a really big one too.
Yeah. What are your goals? What are you trying to do? Yeah, for sure. So, but new gig, right? As I understand it. Yeah. And Real Ag, maybe more familiar to the Canadian listeners than outside Canada. Would that be fair?
It's a radio. So we have our radio program that's on Sirius XM, and that show goes on every night. And then we have Real Ag on the weekend. And I think probably it's been a lot of Canadian based. We started up in Canada, but we're North American wide now. And I know a lot of people like following Wheat Pete Johnson, and we have quite the personalities at Real Agriculture. So that's where I've been. And just started up a podcast called Ruminating with Real Ag.
And is that kind of something that was your idea or something that you wanted to see revived or brought back? Was that something that you kind of took the reins on as far as getting it started again?
I am taking the reins on starting it. However, it was something that Real Agriculture was running a while ago with a different host, and it's been kind of just sitting there for the last little bit. And so I was super excited when they asked if I would want to take that on, because, of course, as you know, I love cattle and I love talking about cattle, and this will kind of be a little bit of everything within production methods. Our first episode launched September 25th, and it was on genetics. And so the truth is, I don't always I don't always find my fit within genetics. I'm kind of like, okay, I see the importance, but not the most interesting topic for my own personality. And it was amazing. It was so much fun. It was with Betty Jo Allman from Egg Sites, and she just has so much to say about the different places that breeding can come into play and how important it is with different herds, depending on what you're wanting to do and what your goals are.
Talk to me about kind of the release schedule. How often are new episodes going to be coming out?
Right. So we're going to be releasing a new episode once a month at this point in time, and it'll be the last Wednesday of every month. So our next one's on nutrition with Barry Remsio.
And where's he out of?
He is in Alberta. He actually used to work for Alberta Egg and is now he just does his own work and is a private consultant.
What have been some of the things that you have been learning? What's kind of stood out to you in this journey?
I've been falling back in love with farming. That's been the biggest part of my journey in the last little bit. And so kind of my falling back in love with farming started up with I launched a documentary last year, and that was a big part of it, getting to go out to some friends' farms again, getting to see a little more farming on the small scale and speaking with more people that are super excited and passionate about it. And it really brought back that reminder of why we do this and what the importance in it is.
Yeah, what's the goal as far as the podcast is concerned? What kind of target are you shooting at? What are you hoping to accomplish?
We're really wanting to just reach cow-calf producers, backgrounders, anyone that just wants to talk about cows, really. And I mean, the reality is there's a lot of people that are coming into getting a herd for the first time, or maybe just running into some management issues, whether that be grazing or nutrition, and just wanting a little bit of guidance on it. So that's kind of the goal, is just to do some production stuff that's out there and available for listeners.
Do you have a sense of what's bringing people to the cattle industry as far as new people coming in that are kind of might be listening to the podcast looking for information? Do you have a sense of what it is that's drawing them?
Within my networks, I have seen a lot of people that are wanting to be a little more food sovereign. And so, and that's just, that's not, there's no stats on that, I don't think. But I have definitely seen within my networks, there are a lot of people that want to be more food sovereign. A lot of people are wanting to try raising cows for the first time. And then, of course, we have the guys who've been running cow-calf all the time. But as you know, we never really stop learning in this industry. It's a nonstop, right? So I think there's something there for everybody.
Yeah, I've quoted him many times, but my dad has a friend who always says the learning curve continues to be straight up.
Yes, I like that. It's for sure.
Yeah. Where are you? What are some of the topics that you think will be ones that you'll be covering in the next few months? What are some of the things that you said? You have nutrition coming up. Do you kind of have a schedule or a calendar put together of things that these are the things we're going to focus on?
Yeah, a little bit. So like I said, we did genetics, nutrition, and specifically nutrition without wintering, which is a term that I actually heard for the first time this year. But wintering is basically not in a pen. Mm-hmm. So that's what that one's going to be based on. We have one coming up with Kelly Sidoric, and that'll be in November. So that one is on grazing management, and kind of that holistic management idea. One of the ones I'm looking into right now that I'm really excited about is I'm looking to find, and if any of your listeners know of somebody that'd be great for this, I'm actually looking to find a feedlot that is doing compost and then using that compost either on their own fields or for their neighbors, and how that's working. So that's one that I'm looking for, but I'm excited to talk about it because I have a couple friends that do use compost, and we have a really good composting facility at the Westlock landfill here. And Dr. Derek McKenzie has been working on a lot of studies when it comes to the what exactly that's doing to the land. And then my friend Colby is putting it out onto his land and using it to grow crops. So it's interesting to hear feedback from him. So definitely looking for something of that nature. Yeah, so a lot of topics of in that way. I'd like to do something on calving and winter versus spring calving is one of the topics I have lined up. So a whole bunch of stuff happening.
Sure. Do you want to hear my theory on the difference in languages or the difference in terms in the East versus the West? And I think it probably holds true somewhat in Canada as well. I'm more confident in as far as the United States are concerned, but I have a theory about that.
Okay, what's your theory? I have to hear this.
So my theory is that east of the 100th meridian, the influence is from Europe, and not from Europe, from England. And so then west of the 100th meridian, the influence is from Spain. And so in east of the 100th meridian, we have farms and we talk about outwintering cattle. And west of the 100th meridian, we have ranches and we talk about, grazing through the winter or whatever. We don't really think about, we wouldn't even consider locking an animal up through the winter. We might haul more feed to them in one operation versus another, but we wouldn't consider locking them up because that's not what any of our neighbors do. And I think a lot of that is because of soil differences in the east versus the west, where they've got maybe lighter soils in the east, where they can do more damage being out there in the winter when it's muddy, maybe not frozen, versus the west where it might be more frozen in some of those places. So that's kind of my theory, that we've got a difference in influence from our histories, right? The English influence in some of those more Eastern contexts, and then the Spanish influence in some of the Western contexts. So
interesting. And that kind of makes sense. I think the moisture also has a big part to play. Like I was in British Columbia and looking at some of their strategies. And I mean, they feed out on concrete because it's so wet out there, like all the time.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. And I guess coming from England and those areas would be really wet as well.
Right. Yeah. So that's what kind of helped. There's been a few different experiences throughout the podcast that have helped that click for me. One of them was talking to Buck Brannaman, who's a horse trainer, and he talked. We just talked about the history of the vaquero style of horsemanship and how it all came from Spain and the Spanish missions up the California coast, and so that kind of helped. But even before that, way back, like before even episode 100 with Bob Havard, I think he was episode 98. He told me that he was kind of a radical in England because he outwinters his cattle, and I'd never heard that term before.
Yeah, I had never heard the term before this year either, and I'm like, it makes sense. Like we talk about swath grazing, we talk about bale grazing, and but to have one term to kind of encompass them all really does make a lot more sense. It's easier.
Yep.
So yeah, the hopes is that we'll do a few topics on that because I think it is important, and there's different, especially with the push for cover crops right now. So there will be some cover crop stuff as well.
Yeah, and I think that you're in Canada. There's more winter in Canada than other places, and so you've got a wealth of people around you to help you think about outwintering, right?
There's a lot of winter. I think we did hit 35 degrees last night, or possibly lower.
Yeah.
For the first time. So this was the first time there was frost on my windshield this morning.
Right.
That was not a fun time. Like, no, it's too early still.
Yeah. No, we're just having our typical September, October windy day. As I don't know, something about the shift from one season to the next. You've always got to have a week where it's just windy all week, and today's one of those.
The winds
days.
of change.
Yeah, right. Bringing in new seasons. Yep, that's where we're at. So, yeah, Kelly Sidoric will be great. Really enjoy talking to her. She's I got a chance to meet her when I was in Canada, and really enjoyed that very much. She's a neat lady.
She's incredible. I absolutely adore her. So it was a lot of fun getting to talk. We did soil school with her as well. And 10 minutes just wasn't enough time. Not even a little bit.
Right,
I feel
no
like
doubt.
the hour wasn't enough time.
Where are most of the people that you'll be interviewing coming from? Are they kind of spread out and well represented across North America?
All over the place. Right now, I have a lot of people in Alberta, but that's mainly because that's where my network is here in Alberta. But I am looking for people down the States, all over the place. We want all of North America involved in this.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges facing today's agriculturalists that you think are going to be topics that you'll tackle?
Weather. Weather's a big one. I think that's a big one. And speaking about cattle specifically, because real agriculture as a whole is in all sides of agriculture. But when it comes to cattle specifically, I think a lot of it, I mean, the climate change piece has been really big. And with that, of course, comes government regulations and where that's going to go. So I have seen in the last while, ranchers and cattle producers in general trying to figure out kind of what the best way to do things is while still fitting into some of the government regulations and, while maintaining, of course, the legacies that a lot of people have started on their land or are trying to continue. And I think that that's a big thing. I don't know that I'm going to be tackling that in an episode very soon, but I do think that that's something relevant and it's something to keep in mind when even talking about soil health or cover crops or some of these production practices. Why are we doing it and what impact does that have on the longevity of our ranches? I think that's a really big piece.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Understanding Ag. We've been fortunate to feature a number of Understanding Ag's regenerative farming and ranching experts on the podcast over the years. In that time, Understanding Ag's reputation for helping producers understand and successfully and profitably apply money-saving regenerative principles and practices has only grown. And there are two primary reasons for that. First, Understanding Ag's consultants are farmers and ranchers who've been there, done that on their own regenerative farms. And second, Understanding Ag's consultants aren't in the business to sell you costly inputs. They get no commissions and you get no pressure. Just profit-building solutions for your operation. Learn more at understandingag.com and discover the hope in healthy soil. That's www.understandingag.com. You mentioned earlier that there's a push for cover crops. Where is that coming from?
Our government out here has funding through OFCAF, the On-Farm Climate Action Fund, there's three streams. So there's nitrogen management, cover crops, and rotational grazing. I don't think I'm missing any there. I could be. But yeah, so cover cropping is one of them that they're really working to promote. And that is for that soil health piece and trying to get a little more diversity out into the pastures and into some of our cropping methods. And so that's been a really, really big one that I think a lot of producers, it's still relatively new. Like I know that there's been guys that have been doing it for a while. I mean, Gabe Brown and all of them, but it hasn't been widespread. And so I think a lot of people are trying to figure out their context when it comes to cover cropping. Where do they fit in? What are they doing? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And how are you seeing that implemented, in that context? Are you seeing some of that grazed, or is it a lot of it? I learned a new term when I was in Canada, rolling green. Or are they green manure? Are they rolling it down? How is it? Does it need to be used specifically in a certain way to fit into the OFCAF? Kind of how they'd like to see it used.
Right. I'm not an expert on the funding. So that I can't answer. I do know that a lot of the people in my region here are going and grazing it. That's been a lot of it. I was actually just out 2 months ago on maybe a little bit longer. I was out on this corn crop. And so the producer, Byron Long, was working with wider corn row spacing. And then I think he said 16 or 20 species mix in between the corn rows. And it was a jungle. It was absolutely fantastic to see. And he's going to be strip grazing that. So I think a lot of the producers out here are working to strip graze and feed their cattle that way. Which is nice. It's kind of, I feel like it's a bit of a promo for the mixed farms, which I would love personally to see more of. And it's nice to see some cattle out on the landscape on stuff that wouldn't normally have cows on it. So it's been good.
Like in Byron's case, is he going to harvest the corn and then graze the cover crops, or how's that?
No, so that's going to be grazed as well. The corn will be. And up north here, we actually don't do a lot of corn harvesting. It's our season just isn't long enough for it.
Sure.
So the corn that a lot of growers are growing, and that's not everybody, but a lot of growers are growing corn just for feed value.
Right. And is there any chopping that happens, like silage chopping? Does that happen there with the corn? Or
yes.
Yeah.
There is people silaging it. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but I know that it does happen up here. The people that I know just really love their electric fences.
Yeah. So most of that is grazed as a standing crop. Is that right?
It is. Yeah, that's right.
Which is very uncommon in my context, but I do hear a lot about Canadians doing grazing standing corn. Right.
And you guys do a lot of corn just for the grain, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Ethanol, I think, and the majority of it ends up as ethanol, and then quite a bit of it ends up as high fructose corn syrup and other things. But yeah, that
right.
is.
So do they graze the stalks afterwards?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
Yeah. I love to see, I'll be positive and say I love to see fences around cornfields, because it indicates that there's probably going to be a cow on there eventually. But it isn't. I wouldn't say it's probably the majority of cornfields that have a fence around them that I pass by. There's a lot of them that are just open. And now, benefit of the doubt, they could go in there with some temporary fence and put it up and keep the cows in and graze the stalks. But from what I understand, no, it doesn't. That is not the norm.
Right. And does your government have funding for the similar strategies, management techniques?
Yeah, they do. Depending on, they do. They have, CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program, there's a lot of funding, and a lot of those practices would be pretty progressive, I would say. And so I think that there's funding out there. Maybe just isn't what they're seeking to do. I think that
right.
the Jeff Ramsire's been quoted many, many times on the Working Cows podcast when he said, corn, soybeans, Florida is a hard crop rotation to compete with when you're talking about having to bring in cows for the winter. So,
right. Although from what I've been hearing, cows are worth a fair bit right now.
Yes.
So maybe that'll actually help people, buy into a herd, which would be fantastic.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was just speaking to a fellow, Dr. Caillou Guan, out of the University of Illinois, and he's working on a project that is actually using satellite imagery along with artificial intelligence, that when this goes through, you guys, and I'm hoping that it'll come into Canada too, would actually be able to monitor your GHG emissions at the farm level, like almost instantly, like pretty much real time. And that was a really interesting conversation. I think it's hard to talk about anything like cover cropping or any of these management changes without like, hey, how are we measuring this? And so it was a fascinating conversation. I think that it's cool to see a lot of the funding dollars go into things like that, and even coming from the States.
Yeah. Earlier when you talked about mixed farms, you're talking about people that aren't just doing crops. They also have livestock. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. And
I think that is less common today than it was, 50 years ago. And I think that I hope what we're seeing is a swinging of that pendulum back to having both. And I don't necessarily think, because the farms have gotten so big in a lot of the, a lot of our farming contexts, I don't necessarily think that it would have to be something that the operation owns the cattle and the ground and the farm equipment, but it could be something that there's a farmer who takes care of this land during the growing season, and then maybe a cover crop comes in behind it, and then somebody else who owns the cows, or a custom grazer who finds the cows and brings them to the land and leases the land. I think we could find things like that happening more and more frequently. It would be my hope. I would love to see that.
I really hope so as well. Working with people is hard. And I know you've talked to Kelly, and Kelly is a big proponent on how to work with people. But I know that piece is probably one of the biggest complications when it comes to working with others. Because on the crop side, you're looking for certain goals and you have certain things in mind. And then of course the cattle producer has certain things in mind as well. But when you can work together, it's just going to benefit everybody. And I'm hoping that we'll see a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Dallas Mount, way back on episode 2 of the Working Cows podcast, when I asked him what was the biggest hurdle for success in the, in operations, is it the cows, the land, the animals, the money, the people? Nope. Without a doubt, he said, exact quote, without a doubt, it's the people. So those are always the hardest relationships for us to manage. And the more we can put those conversations front and center and make sure that people are figuring out a way to manage their relationships with the people in their operation, I think the better off we'll be, right?
Mm-hmm. And let's be real, communication is difficult.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Nope.
Especially with those that are closest to you quite often. Mm-hmm. I know succession has been a really big hot topic. So that might be one that would be worth covering on the podcast too, because that's a really big topic. And there are a lot of family farms that want to pass it down to the next generation. But trying to structure that when the younger person coming up has very different ideas from what their parents and grandparents did. It's a hard conversation to have, but it's important and it has to be done.
Yeah. I've heard said many times, that you don't have to farm like your grandfather did. But then the other day I heard the other half of the quote, or somebody else filled in the quote and said, you don't have to farm like your grandfather did, but you shouldn't forget why your grandfather did what he did, Oh,
I like that. Yeah, that's for sure.
And I think
we're seeing a lot of that when you think about even the farming practices that we're promoting a lot of the time, right? We've lost some of the lessons that were learned, like even 50 years ago. And, it's important to be trying new things, but it's also important to remember why things were done the way that they were to begin with.
Yep. Do you have any plans for succession episodes then, or is that just one on the whiteboard of things that we'll get there?
It's that I definitely have like a big spreadsheet right now, a ton of ideas, and it's just a matter of lining up the people for interviews and seeing who fits best where, and then schedules, because we just got out of summer and it is really, really difficult to get anybody to talk during the summer. We're all busy out on our ranches, so.
When you're trying to schedule with somebody who doesn't know how to use the scheduling software like myself, and they leave spots open that shouldn't be open, and then they have to say, no, I can't make that work actually. And but you were patient and I appreciate it.
Your scheduling software is pretty slick. I was impressed by that. I'm like, what? You don't even need someone to sit there at a desk in order to figure out what your calendar is. That's awesome. Yeah.
If I use it right, it's really helpful, but sometimes I forget to mark off days that I'm not going to be available. So anyways, but yeah, it is fun. It is good network expanding experience. I would imagine that you're having the same experience, right? Your network is growing through this new adventure.
By leaps and bounds. And it's actually been so much fun just to even hear what, some of the growers are doing. Because I don't have a big background on the crop side. So getting to learn exactly what they're doing and why, and I love bugs, so I've gotten to do a lot of interviews with entomologists, and that's always a good time. Yeah, there's nothing like sitting down for a drink with an entomologist, I'll tell you.
Those sentences probably aren't said very often. I got to interview an entomologist. That's a good time.
It's such a good time. It's so exciting. Did you know? Okay, this is one for you. You know what an aphid is, right? They're really
Yeah.
cute, kind
Mhm.
of. They're also really hard on crops and plants and stuff in general. Did you know that a female aphid is born with two generations of aphids inside her that are females?
Huh. I did not know that.
So if you kill an aphid, you're killing three generations.
Huh. Yeah. That's a tough critter to compete with. They're made to multiply.
Right?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I have confessed many times on the Working Cows podcast that I am row crop illiterate. And so what have been some of the things you've been learning on that front?
Aphids was one of them, for sure. I have learned a lot about the way canola grows. So Real Agriculture does canola schools, wheat schools, pulse schools, soil schools, a little bit of everything. And I've gotten to learn a lot more about why people do the things they do. A lot more about the way different pieces of equipment work, which is kind of fun because I don't, in my background, I haven't used a whole lot of equipment. This summer was the first time that I really got to drive a tractor and do some work on it, which was kind of fun too. That was around the ranch here. And yeah, so it's been a lot of learning about just some of the things that are affecting growers and how important rotation is. I think that that's probably been the biggest one. Most of the disease and pest issues that you hear about in crops could be fixed with rotating what crop you're growing.
Do you see that changing? Do you see people moving more back to, or maybe just to for the first time, a more diverse rotation?
It's just a perspective and my opinion, but I do feel like people want to, however, there are bills to pay. And that's a really tough one, especially when we've had a number of tough years when it comes to weather, is, it's can be hard to justify. And I mean, we see that in grazing cattle and stuff, right? Like it can be hard to justify leaving a whole bunch of residue when there are bills to pay and cows need to be fed. That's probably one of the things I've learned is that there's a lot of similarities between the two different sides of agriculture. Just you really do need to consider the fact that I honestly believe people are doing their best no matter what industry you're in. And sometimes you have to make decisions for the soil. Sometimes you have to make decisions for the people. Sometimes you have to make decisions to pay the bills, and it's a tough go.
And a lot of those bill paying decisions, right, wrong, or indifferent in our current climate, I think a lot of those bill paying decisions are made at a policy level from federal governments, right? I mean, when it comes right down to it, in a lot of cases, the subsidies are what make those things work, but they also kind of end up being a somewhat guaranteed, I'm going to have some income at least.
Yeah, it's hard. And I mean, like our producers out here have faced, like, especially the grain growers, have faced a lot of challenges this year alone. Like we had a rail strike, we've had the ports on strike in the last little bit. And if things aren't going to market, like it's a challenge. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it gives you a lot of grace for people, it's kind of like, okay, we're all out there doing our best.
Right. Yep. Have you seen people, or seen scenarios where people have made that transition, successfully, or do you have examples, that would help people say, oh, there's a pattern I can follow to, get back to a more diverse operation with the livestock incorporated and more diversity in the rotation? Have you come across those kinds of stories?
Well, I do think that the push for cover crops has been doing a lot of that. Because I mean, if there's an option to grow something else and then a reason to put livestock on it, you're probably going to put livestock on it. I have a neighbor here who has crops and they've been working with a custom grazer and have been grazing off, in the winter, grazing off crop residues and stuff, which it's been kind of give or take for them. Same with another neighbor that was doing similar things. So he was bale grazing on cropland, and it's usually comes down to, trying to just figure out what's best for all the people involved. And it's a learning curve for everybody. But I think that a lot of people are trying. The Hutterite colony near me has cows on their cropland and they're grazing their crop residues. And I think we're seeing a lot more of it like those mixed farms that we were talking about, Clay. I think that those mixed farms are trying a lot more of these things because, of course, you have the cows to use and you have the livestock. When there's not as much livestock on the land, it's really hard to even experiment with anything at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you said, the prices right now make it harder to get into livestock. I mean, it makes it more attractive because the prices are good, but it also, that upfront investment is a big capital outlay too. It's like, oh, that's a lot. So
it's hard. And then the land base, like I really feel for any young farmers that are up and coming and wanting to, or not young farmers, but maybe people from the cities and stuff that want to get into farming. I mean, I don't know what your land prices are there, but man, they're really high here. It'd be really hard to justify buying a piece of land. And then, there's fencing costs and then there's a learning curve cost. That's pretty crazy too. So it's a challenge, I think, but I am seeing some really good, there's more and more cows on cropland out here, and it's neat to see. It's a lot of fun to see the diversity. And so even when we speak of our crop growers, they do usually do like canola, wheat, and try to throw some other things in there. And I think it's gonna take off more and more as there's more attention given to the soil health aspect. And I do think like work like Dr. Caillou Guan's down south, and there's some people up here that are working on figuring out what exactly that carbon sequestration method is, how much better it is for the soil when you're doing rotation and getting some diversity out there. I think as that becomes more well known, more people are going to jump on board and want to try it.
Did we just need to spend a few years of having these conversations for the universities to get interested and start doing the studies on what's better, diversity, rotation, those kinds of things? Is that where we were at, do you think, or what has brought that attention to these practices?
I think it's the push for climate change. Of course, there's more dollars going towards it right now, especially in Canada, and I know the States has been too. I think too, a big one of the issues faced by a lot of researchers, and again, my opinion, but I think a lot of it comes down to it's really hard to quantify some of these things, especially when you're talking about pasture land and you're trying to talk about the carbon sequestration of different management practices. Like, there's a big coordination in trying to do that because science is very exact and you need to be able to replicate it. And we can't replicate one year from another, never mind pieces of land and elevations and I could go on. Management practices. Like, I don't know that any producer exactly imitates another, right? So you put in all that together and it just doesn't lend itself nicely to science. And I think that it's just been how do we figure this out? How are we going to quantify it? What does that look like? And I do think that technology is making a bit of a difference in that. Like I said, satellites and being able to figure out exactly how much ground is covered and what amount of photosynthesis you're getting. I think that there's tools like that are coming available, but I do think we're still trying to figure out, okay, there's a lot of producers that are seeing things on the ground as they try new things, but how do we quantify it and what does that look like?
Well, I think in a pasture setting where you've got a lot of diversity out there, every piece of diversity is another variable that you can't totally isolate for the purposes of studying something, right? Where you've got a climate controlled lab, you can isolate all the variables and study this one thing and get a real replicatable result. When you try to do that in the pasture setting with all of these different variables and all this diversity, it just is. I think I would agree. It's probably nearly impossible to get something that's replicatable. At least where we're at now, and maybe that, like you said, maybe the technology is going to come along and it'll be easier to get something that we can say, yeah, this is making this difference. X practice is making Y difference. So,
right. And ranching is a lot more difficult for that, right? You think of, so we've had carbon credits available for no-till practices and different crop management practices. But crops are a lot easier to research because you know a lot more of what exactly is happening and what the variables are. Research is an interesting topic.
For sure. I don't envy those people at all.
Trying to decide. And then, especially when the pressure is on to have government policies based on it or things like carbon credits, because of course companies or the government don't want to be spending a bunch of money on something that doesn't work, hopefully.
Yeah.
And it's a tough go because that means you do need that more scientific numbers to come behind it and to offer up what we're doing.
What's exciting to you in agriculture right now? What are some of the things that are really piquing your interest?
On a personal scale, I had a milk goat and learned how to make cheese this summer. So actually that kind of did. So I haven't done a lot with smaller livestock and learning what fences keep in goats and what fences don't keep in goats.
Concrete swimming pools keep in goats.
Concrete swimming pools, yeah. Electric fences do, but the 3-wire didn't work so well. 4-wire seems to be doing very well. We'll see once it gets colder though, and they want out a little bit more often. So that's really interesting. And I do think, like, of course, my passions have been in soil health and in bugs, and so a lot of that continues along the way, and just the nonstop learning, like I said, whether it's learning about cropping systems and why people are doing what they're doing. I really like the people piece. I love to understand the why of things and where we're coming at from them, and it just gives a lot more context to everything that we do.
Sure. Yeah, very good. Where can people go to find the Ruminating with Real Ag show?
So can find it at realagriculture.com or on YouTube by just searching Ruminating with Real Ag, or on our YouTube channel, which is Real Agriculture as well. And the podcast will be available on Spotify. And I know Google Podcasts has switched over to YouTube Music. And so we're still kind of playing around with that, but it is on there as well.
Very good. And Apple Podcasts as well, I'm assuming?
I'm quite sure Apple Podcasts too.
Yeah, that's a good idea. They're not as big as they used to be, but they're still the biggest dog in the pack for sure. So,
right.
Yep. We will have links to that in the show notes page for today. So, Amber, I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a blast, Clay.
Very good stuff there, as always, with Amber. Appreciate her taking time to share a little bit of what's going on and some of the new things that she's been working on in her career. And very excited to be joined once again by John Kempf. John probably needs no introduction to this audience. He is the host of the Regenerative Agriculture podcast and is one of the principal partners at Advancing Eco Ag, and they do some great work. And I've pitched an idea to John about what I'd like to talk to him about, but I want to defer to him until I hear back from him to see if that's a good direction for us to head. So you can come back next week and find out, along with everybody else, what we're talking to John Kempf about. We'll see you again real soon on another episode of the Working Cows Podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.